one from George. George, you want to do that now?
Yes.
Okay. Let me see if I can do it. And I think, Charlie, you said you had one.
I don't have one. I don't have one tonight.
Oh, okay. Well,
I was trying, but I got pulled away today. So next time, don't you worry. I'll have one.
we will forgive you.
I know. Thank you.
Can everybody see it?
Yep.
You can. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Ron, let me know when you want me to change and we will take it and then have
Okay. I have to preface this with the fact that I go to sleep at night with the television on. When I wake up about between 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock, the Smithsonian channel is on, and they have Aerial America. I don't know if any of you've ever watched Aerial America or not, but it's fascinating because they use drones. They don't ever land on any place, but they show you all these buildings and things from the air. And one morning, I don't think I ever really saw it, but I heard them talking about something that piqued my interest. So I started to tell the story of this. Well, let's move on to the next slide.
Okay.
I have some questions first. From the looks of that picture, what state comes to mind?
Florida.
Florida.
I've given you some clues on the next page. So you can choose from one of those four.
Florida.
Florida. Well, let's see if that's right. Yep, it was Florida. And then there's a statue right in the middle of that picture. So in the next slide, question number 2 is what statue is pictured here? I blew it up a little bit, trying to make it match in with the background was a little bit of a challenge. But what statue is that pictured? Let's see what some choices are. The governor of Florida, a friendly milkman, a state senator, or a barefoot mailman?
Let's try Barefoot Mailman.
Barefoot Mailman. How many of you ever heard of the Barefoot Mailman? Paul.
I heard it from you. That's all I know.
You heard it from me. Well, let's do a little bit with the next slide. The Barefoot Mailman is the answer. If you look at that statue, he has bare feet. And I'll show you some others along the way. Now, let me tell you the story of the Barefoot Mailman. It goes back to the mid-1800s, and we were having mail delivered by trains and other means. But to stretch a coastline between present-day Palm Beach and Miami, a stretch of about 68 miles, remained largely untouched since Ponce de Leon sailed past in 1513. Next slide. Now, I didn't give credit to the U.S. Postal Service for all these stamps, but I'm not going to sell this and I'm not going to market it. And I'll put the annotations in for the stamps if I have time, but it takes a lot of time to do that. In the early 1700s, the local Native American tribes had disappeared. It was a wild country. There were cougars, black bears. They roamed freely. I couldn't find a good stamp with a black bear on it. I'm sure there is one, but in my collection, I didn't find one. And alligators infested the inlets and the waterways. The amazing thing is those bobcats. We know about alligators. So if you go to the next slide, we'll look at what happened with the barefoot route. There was a section of Florida in the early 1880s that didn't get mail service from the Lake Worth area in Florida, which is up towards the top of that map, down to the Miami area, which is at the bottom of that map. There were no mail routes. The mail route was carried by star routes to Titusville, to Palm Beach. but there was no delivery mail south of Palm Beach. So let's look at the next slide. The star route to carrymail between Lake Worth, which is the northern part of this map, and Biscayne Bay was established in 1885. Now that's amazing to me that they had men who were carrying mail from place to place, probably carrying stamps, probably carrying money that was used to pay for those stamps. And there was no route to do what we see today as modern traffic area. Well, this route involved a round trip of 136 miles. That's a pretty long paper route. If you're delivering it on a bike, if you're walking, it's a really long paper route. It took 6 days for the postman to carry mail from West Palm Beach to Miami and back again. Next slide. Below that, to the south, Miami and the communities around Biscayne Bay received mail by weekly schooner from Key West. So the mail came up from the bottom by ship, came down from the top by train, but there was this section in the middle that didn't get any mail service. So let's go to the next slide. Next one, Paul. The mail carrier would leave Palm Beach on Monday morning. He traveled by boat to the southern end of the Lake Worth Lagoon. And then from boat, and I've tried to put some stamps on there that relate to this. From the Lake Worth Lagoon, he would cross over to the beach. So let's look at the next slide. He would cross over to the beach and he'd walk down to the Orange Grove House of Refuge. That is a picture of that house. The internet lets us find stuff historically that we might never have seen before. The Orange Grove House of Refuge used to be a lifeguard station and a place for the lifeguards to live. And then anybody passing by could stop and stay there. So the mailman carrying his mail would go through the waterways to the beach, and then on the beach, he would walk down to the next station. Let's look at the next slide. By Tuesday, he would continue walking to the Fort Lauderdale House of Refuge. Again, another lifeguard station. And it was probably hot on hot days and cold on cold days, as Florida can be. But he would spend the night there again. Next slide. The route was called the Barefoot route because the carriers obviously walked barefoot on the beach. The mail carriers and others who had learned the method of walking along the long distances on a sloping beach. You ever walked on the beach for a long period of time in one direction? You're always walking sideways because your body's out of balance. These were called beach walkers. Now I slipped some other beach walkers in and some stamps from the Philippines because you guys know I like the Philippines. And they have some interesting stamps. I don't know that they would be my favorites, but those things walk along the beach also. Next slide. The first barefoot mailman has been documented. There's a man named Edwin R. Bradley. He was a retired newsman. He lived in Lake Worth, and he won the contract in 1885 to deliver mail every week for $600 a year. It seems to me that was a pretty good paying job, but it was also a difficult job. And then his son Louis and he took turns carrying the mail once a week for about 2 years. His second son, Guy Bradley would later become famous because he was murdered, serving as the game warden. We've had many of our officers of different sorts attacked or shot or whatever for protecting animals, protecting people, what have you. What's wrong with that picture on the left?
The USA's backward.
Yeah, I flipped it just to make it fit. Next slide, Paul. The third and most famous of the Barefoot Mailman was James Ed Hamilton, who had come to Hypaluxo. That's an Indian name for the town where they were living. And Hamilton became a barefoot route contractor when Bradley quit. So he was the third of them. As the story goes, he disappeared one time while walking his route. And they have a date, October 10th, 1887, when Hamilton basically disappeared. He wasn't feeling well when he went through town, and he had not returned by the end of the week. And you know, people were probably impatient because they didn't get their mail. So they started a search. Let's look at the next slide. They found his clothes. They found his mail pouch. They didn't find his boat. And he never arrived at the Fort Lauderdale House of Refuge, which again was a Red Cross station for lifeguarding. So, next slide says that the boat that Hamilton used to cross the inlet was missing. They presumed that he drowned or had been taken by a shark or an alligator, and I'm not sure the shark story holds any water. But an alligator might well have gotten him when he tried to swim across the inlet to get his boat from the other side. But nobody knows where his boat was, and his body was never recovered. There's a book, there's actually several books that have been written about the Barefoot Mailman, and they really tell in a little more depth and more intriguing detail than my presentation. Next slide. Well, even to this day, there is a marking on this mail route, Barefoot Mail Room, and the Boy Scouts of America sponsor an annual hike. It's a 2-day hike. They don't do the whole thing. 136 miles would be a long trip to take kids on. But the Scouts carry actual U.S. mail. I love that term. Actual mail, real mail, not just something in a bag. They're totally self-sufficient. They're provided water along the way. And they hike from Pompano Beach to South Miami Beach. There's a statue that you see in the lower right-hand corner. And the illustration of the man walking, the artistic painting, I did a little bit of, not Photoshop, just basic tinting of a photograph. Next slide, Paul. There are other noted characters. I listed them in here because I found a good picture of a barefoot mailman in a museum down in Florida. And there's a list of names that were barefoot mailmen. The last one being Henry John Burkhart, the last barefoot mailman. That brings me close to the end. One more slide. That's the story I have to tell about the Barefoot Mailman. It was inspired by hearing about him on the Smithsonian Channel and then doing a little bit of digging and lots of pictures to look at. So I present that to you as the left, the historical Barefoot Mailman, the right, the modern day Barefoot Mailman. who served us well. We always look forward to getting the mail, don't we? That's it, folks.
Very good. Very nice, George. Thank you. You always win the contest for the greatest PowerPoints. And as we keep saying, when COVID's over, we'll start your classes for it with you.
Oh,
Where is that statue located?
I think it's in Bradenton.
Bradenton. Okay.
If you just do a search for Barefoot Mailman, you'll come up with lots of pictures on Bing or Google or whatever you use to find pictures. And the books are relatively old. I didn't try to find one because I had so much information I didn't know what to do with it.
And James Hamilton, you said they found his clothes in his mail bag, but not him.
But not him, nor his boat.
The mail was there mail? Do you know if it was stolen or not? Or
Well, that I don't know. And maybe the book would give me that information.
yeah.
I might do a little more research.
Very interesting. Thank you. Yes. Questions for George, everybody? Okay, well, thank you.